My name is Manashi. I'm a photo consultant and photo rep. As a photo consultant, I help photographers by selecting and editing their work in the best, showing the best work possible, curating their work for their online portfolios, print portfolios, marketing material, and that kind of thing, and helping them understand just where they fit into the industry at whole. I'm having language issues this morning. And as a photo rep, I help, I have an all-female roster, and I elevate them in the commercial photography industry, marketing their work, estimating, and being their cheerleader, I guess, as one of my photographers likes to call me. So what I'm doing is I do these live reviews once a week. Ever since we've kind of gone into isolation during the coronavirus pandemic, I felt like I wanted to do these live reviews, free live reviews, to help a lot of you who are taking this time to work on the inner workings of your business, your portfolios, and that kind of thing, where you don't usually have the time to do this kind of thing. So this is a perfect time to be spending on this side of your business. And today we're going to be reviewing a portfolio. One second, I'm just going to get my windows. I do love it when people participate in the chat and ask lots of questions, so that I can gear the conversation towards what's going to be most helpful for you based on the website that I'm reviewing. But I can expand on certain things that you want me to expand on, or explain things a little bit more. Okay, so today we are reviewing Lindsay Elliott's website, and I do see that Lindsay is in the chat, so that's fantastic. And she is who we're going to be reviewing. Okay, Lindsay, are you there? Let me know you're still there. And so Lindsay is a Vancouver photographer. I do know who she is, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with her before. So today we're going to be looking at her online portfolio. We open it up right here, and this is the landing page. One thing I will say, Lindsay, and I don't know, this could very well be my internet, because I had some internet issues yesterday. Things were going very slow, so it very well could be that. But your page was loading very slowly. The images were loading slowly when I initially started. It might be better now because everything is cached. But if it's not my internet, maybe look at the sizes of some of your images. I know that one thing, like when you are processing things out in Lightroom, and depending on the website you're using, this is a Squarespace website. So looking at Squarespace specs and just following everything to a T, I know that some of them will give an actual size limit that they don't want you to go past. And you can actually set that in your Lightroom export settings. So even if you set your, the maximum width and to the width and height, to the pixel dimensions that they suggest, as well as, 72 DPI is usually what they have. And then you can actually also set the maximum size that it'll go to, and that's I think right above there in Lightroom, and that makes a big difference. And I've noticed that it does reduce the size significantly and still has the quality. I haven't tried that in Squarespace, but I have done it in Photofolio, so I do know that that it will make a difference. So it could just be, again, my computer, my internet. So if it's not on your end, don't worry about that. Okay, so what else? When I first land on the website, I get a real, first of all, it's really nicely presented and organized, very clean and easy to navigate and tell where I need to go for things. There's a grid right off the bat. It's really clean and minimal and shows me a little bit of a sense of her work. What I will say, with this grid particularly, and as we go through the website, you'll see what I'm talking about. I feel like, Lindsay, I feel like the overview doesn't give me a real sense of what you're capable of. When I actually go into the galleries, I see more that I would like to see on the front page. And I know it's a little bit of a teaser, so you don't want to give it all away, but I do want to, I do want to get like more of an overall view of what your work is. And I would think more work, like you can go a little bit more on what you're showing here. I also feel like a lot of the travel work is like right now on the front page, we're seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 from your travel series. And I don't, and maybe this is something you can speak to in the comments, but I don't feel like that's the direction that your work is going as far as the clients that you're really working with. And you know, I know everybody would love to shoot travel, but realistically, is that your target market? Because I think it's pretty on the page, and it creates some interesting conversations between the images, but I don't think that it is the best use of your front page, because I think a lot of the other work that is showing like a cross section of your lifestyle and commercial work and fashion, sorry, is what I meant to say. Let's see. I have definitely been wrestling with that, more versus less. Sorry, are you talking about more versus less work? I definitely, I think that a little bit more on your overview page would be good. Because it'll give, you want the overview for example, when I got here, I kind of, when we go into the commercial section, I kind of feel like that is more what I would like to see in an overview, because and you don't even have to have an overview. A lot of it is a nice way, especially when you shoot a lot of different things, to show all of those different things in one place so that they get a glimpse at what they are going to see if they go into each of the galleries. So if I'm here and I say, oh, okay, well, clearly she shoots some fashion, although I think, you know, a little bit more of your fashion work and more of your conceptual work as well, I think would be good, because you want to be able to say, okay, now where do I go in the menu to see what I'm seeing here? And then that will, you know, it's a guide as well. But it's also a hit, so that they get a sense of, okay, this is a website that I'm meant to be on. This is where I'm supposed to be, because I see work that is in line with what I'm after. And then they'll dig further. Does that make sense? Lindsay says, I think I just love the colors and felt they showed off the others. I agree. And, you know, this is something I definitely do love incorporating, especially in the grid. I love incorporating work that that is graphic and that tells a story with the rest of the images. I think in this case, I'm just feeling like there are too many from that are doing that and not enough. And like, if you have one or two, like the birds, you know, really are nice with the colors and the grid and everything. But I think that having, you know, maybe it won't feel so heavy on that if you add more images and fill out this overview a little bit more, so that it's not just like, you know, a big representation on your front pages that is the travel work. Okay. Yes, it is pretty. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So, okay, then this is the overview. Then we go into projects. Now, the projects is a big topic that comes up a lot with a lot of photographers that I'm working with, especially photographers who work either editorially or on fashion jobs. Projects is a very common way for photographers who are working on editorial jobs and fashion jobs, because they tend to organize their work by project, and because they want to showcase to a client that this is how I would, you know, this is how I tell a story for a client. And it is effective in doing that. What I would say is I tend, especially because I'm working more on the, commercial end of things. Fashion and editorial are certainly, I certainly work with photographers who do fashion and editorial as well. But I tend to stay away from this type of show, this way of showing work. I do, however, think that the way that Lindsay has done it is really nice, because she does have the other sections, but she also has the project sections. What I would suggest, Lindsay, this is just my opinion, but I think the projects should go to the other end of your menu, and that you should be sending people into these other sections before the project section, because I feel like you want to direct them to the best work, the most well curated best work possible right away. And the project is almost like, okay, here you go. This is here available to you if you'd like to see it in project view. And they'll understand that, they'll understand, okay, I want to see these as projects. I want to see these as projects rather than, the best of the best. But the best of the best, and the reason why I edit that way, why I tend to focus on that with work, is because I think that no matter who you are attracting with your work, you're going to be sending a strong message and attracting those clients, because you're really, really tightly editing and curating that work so that no matter who they are, they're going to want to work with you. And sometimes when you organize by project, it can be off-putting, and you can lose people if the project isn't really strong and isn't really showcasing the best of what you can do. Because in reality, when you send work to a client, not all of the work is going to be hero shots. And what you want with your website is to be showing hero shots. So if it gets diluted, which it often can when you're working with one client on a job and you're shooting very specifically for them, and they might really want a shot that is a certain thing, but it doesn't necessarily translate when somebody else is looking at it from their own perspective. In your case, Lindsay, I feel like you've done a really good job with putting together your projects, and it does give you an opportunity to show a little bit more work, and a little bit more work from each project. If you were, I personally prefer the other way of doing it. I do think that yours is effective, and does do the job. One thing that I would say though is that sometimes, like, this one feels a little out of place, and like there's work in here that I definitely feel isn't necessarily helping your case. Like, I would edit this quite a bit more tightly. And it feels a little off brand as well. Like, some of the work feels off brand for me. And when I look at, a few of the individual shots, and this is why I tend to focus on the hero shot method of editing, is because, you can incorporate some of these shots as more kind of, they're not necessarily conceptual, but, more as interesting photographs in and of themselves. Whereas when I see it as a collection, it doesn't speak to me. And I worry that it might detract for some of your other clients who it also doesn't speak to. Does that make sense? I also feel like, at the very bottom here, you have social and travel. And I'm assuming, because I do know we've spoken in the past, excuse me, I think I need to drink some water. When we have spoken in the past, we've talked about your, like, a lot of the social and party work that you've done in the past. And I do love this work. I'm just wondering if it makes sense in your projects gallery, because it isn't really a project. is it? Like, unless it is, and I'm mistaken, and this is one body of work, but in a project section, I kind of feel like it's like one body of work that you shot for one client. And so it doesn't seem like the right place for this. You're the second person to say Chorleone Men's Choir doesn't fit in. I added it because I would love to do more stories for magazines, etc. But I can see what you're saying. Yeah, and I get that. I think that you get a real sense that you can tell stories for magazines in other ways on your website, and I don't think you need that to tell them that. And I think that's one thing that a lot of photographers do struggle with, is this idea of showing a client what that you can do a certain thing, and showing them that you can do something just because you've done it before isn't necessarily communicating that to them. Because if the work doesn't fit, it's just going to feel out of place, and like it doesn't make sense in there. I think a lot of your other work tells stories in a different way that you even in your portrait section, which we'll get to in a little while. I think you get a sense that you can tell an editorial story, and this body of work to me doesn't tell that in the best way. And even if you put it in another section, more as in a hero shot kind of context, I think that there's a way of incorporating just, a select few into a grid that might because they're kind of close in the grid, it still references that they're part of the same shoot, they're part of the same story, without being too obvious and literal about it. But I also feel like I'm not sure that any of the work really makes sense on your website, because it doesn't fit with a lot of the rest of it. And there's going to be a ton of clients that you have. This is speaking to all photographers who are listening right now. There are going to be a lot of clients that you have that might be, more of the type of work that you want to get, but what you end up shooting for them is not really what you're known for, and it's not really portfolio worthy work. And I know it's very tempting to say, oh, I had this great client and I want more clients like this, so I'm going to show the work from the shoot, even though it doesn't feel right. And I think always, that usually, first of all, when you have a new client and new work, it's always a good idea to sit on things for quite a while before you put them on your website, because oftentimes you're excited about something because you're closer to it and it just happened and you're really excited about it and you want more work like that. But it's kind of like going grocery shopping when you're hungry. Not a good idea usually. Excuse me. So I would definitely avoid doing that. Does that all help? Lindsay says the social gallery is 2 to 3 different clients. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of that work would make more sense in the other galleries and not so much on its own. But I do also. I get what you're also trying to do by kind of distinguishing it as its own kind of aesthetic and its own way of approaching a shoot. But I think that when you're putting it in the project section, it's saying that it was for one client. And I think that in this case, I feel like it would make more sense either as its own section, and maybe you add other work into it that feels like it fits with this, and putting it, in your other gallery. I also think there are different ways that you could organize your sections, and I will get into that a little bit, but yeah. So dialogue, I feel, is a client. Travel, again, feels similar to social, where it doesn't really fit into the projects category because it's not one body of work. I feel like this is more kind of your creative work, and maybe that becomes a creative section, but I understand you don't want to have too many sections going on. One of the things, I think this came up maybe on the last call, somebody said, do you prefer a top menu or a side menu? One of the things that helps me determine if I want to use a side menu or a top menu is how many sections there are going to be and how things are going to be organized. Because with a top menu, you end up with either you have like one menu item and it becomes really long if you add more sections, or you have a drop down. And some people don't like to use the drop down because it just adds, you know, another dimension to it. Whereas if you use a side menu, you can have sub menus that are always there. So it's just a way to visually organize your work so that it doesn't become this, you know, overwhelming thing or tons of drop downs. So if there's going to be a lot of sections where, say, I'm going to have fashion, but I'm going to have subsections under it, then a side menu makes a lot more sense in that case, because you're able to still visually have everything there. I will say Squarespace doesn't allow you to keep the sub menu open, whereas somewhere like Photofolio, you can keep the sub menu open all the time. So it's not just something that you have to click on to open up. So I will weigh all of those options when I'm deciding. So if a photographer is committed to using just Squarespace, then we'll, you know, decide how the menu is best going to be displayed. But I don't know. I feel like there's some other ways that you could be organizing your sections, and I'll go a little bit further into that. The work itself is, you know, great, and I do love seeing some of these as projects, because it does it does give a sense of how you did it for that particular client. So I think this has more. Is that, I don't know. I felt like it was not loading fully. So the other thing, Lindsay, that I just wanted to point out is when I go into, when I see like this kind of section, this particular client in here, it makes me feel, and this is just a psychological thing, that because I see this and it feels so out of place and it feels so I don't know, what it does for me is it makes me think you're not, you don't have, these are all your clients. It's not making me feel like these are just the projects that you want to show me. It makes me think these are all your clients, because you're showing me something that isn't really resonating and feeling like it fits. I know that that's not the case, but I do feel like, you know, having a really tight projects list will also make it appear like you're showing just what's good. You know, not, it's all going to be good, but just what's relevant and the best kind of thing. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that another way, and this is something that I feel would be more effective in your case, Lindsay, so I'm going to head back to the questions in a second, but is a tear page, like a client page that shows how the images were used, and shows the actual placement of the images with the copy and how the end design ended up, where it was used. Was it in a magazine? Was it on a billboard? Where was it? With their kind of design and copy on it. Because it gives, first of all, it shows like you've been published, you've had your work shown and used in these ways in a commercial context, in an editorial context. And it also shows some of the work that you didn't necessarily, isn't something you would select for your portfolio, but how a client sees things and how they're looking for work. But in a way that kind of shows it, you know, separated from, because it's more from the client perspective. So that's something that I would encourage you to do, is start to get your hands on some of these tears from the clients that show how the images were used, and turn this into more of a client section rather than a project section. That's my personal thought, but I also, I do like how you've done it. I do like, you know, what you have. I would just tighten it up a bit. Okay, so I'm going to just head to the questions for a second. Jamie says, I wonder that about websites as well. People always say to present the work you want to shoot, but it's hard to do that sometimes because it seems out of place. It's so Jamie, could you just expand on that? Do you mean that showing the work that you want to shoot is hard? I think what you mean, yeah, like editing your work and showing the type of, the work that you want to get. And I think that's one of the things that's difficult as well, is how to show the work that you want to get when you haven't gotten that work. And so you don't have the work to show yet. I think that's where, doing creative shoots comes in. That's where really curating your work and directing the viewer through your work so that what you are showing is in line with the work you want to get. If you don't want to shoot food and you have some food on your website, like you don't want to be doing that. You want to show only work that you want to be getting. And sometimes your work is more more about the style, and what you shoot is less important. But I think it's still, you want to, it's like if you're shooting fashion, but you get some corporate clients, and you don't want to stop getting those corporate clients. I wouldn't put, corporate work on a fashion website, because it doesn't make sense. And you're still going to get corporate clients based on good work. You're still going to get consumer clients based on good work, based on the best work being shown. You're not going to stop getting clients if you're presenting the best work. But you will stop getting clients if you're showing work that is diluted and doesn't send a very strong message about who you are and what you are as a photographer. I think maybe I touched on it, but let me know. Yes, bringing in new work. Yeah. Okay. Lindsay, what would you think if I pulled only from one client? What do you mean by that? If you pulled only from one client? Maybe just expand on that, and I'll go on here to the next thing. See. The other thing, that's nice about Lindsay's work that I think illustrates something nicely to people is that you can shoot different things and still have it all make sense. Her work is tied together by her style and her perspective on the world. It's not tied down to, oh, I shoot, you can, if you're a corporate client, you can come here and you either resonate with the work or you don't. Her work has an edginess to it, and either somebody is going to like that or they're not going to like that, and it doesn't matter. You don't want to appeal to everybody. So corporate client, commercial client, it doesn't matter. They're still going to be drawn to the way that Lindsay sees the world, the way that her perspective on things. So, and that is what ties it together. Okay. Now, when I come here, this is called commercial. I feel, Lindsay, like commercial is not necessarily the best word to describe this. And I personally would suggest, having some breaking this out into a few different things, because I think there's a few different things you have going on. And that's what I was talking about with the different ways to organize. And this is, again, something that I can't really, this is something that I do when I can see everything. So right now I know I'm only seeing what you have on your current website, but I know that there's probably more within all of these categories. But I think you have commercial to me doesn't like, there's fashion and there's portraits, but those are both commercial as well. And I think that commercial says, oh, you're also shooting things that aren't commercial. So and I get that that's maybe more editorial is what these sections are. But I think that, by having maybe a lifestyle section and a conceptual section or something like that might better organize kind of and direct people to viewing your work. I do like sometimes how the lifestyle and the conceptual are mixed, and sometimes it works really well, and other times, such as right here, this image feels out of place here for me. I think that you may have a kind of more like light lifestyle section and kind of a more conceptual, like with this and you know, you've got, it doesn't necessarily, it's not all necessarily conceptual, but it feels more advertising. So does the lifestyle work, but it's a different kind of advertising. So I feel like there's like a way to organize your work that might be more, be able to direct your viewers a little bit more, so that when they enter a section, they kind of, it's what they are wanting to see for their purposes. Does that make sense? And how exactly that's done would really depend on what else you have. This feels out of place here. Like this feels so different than this. And all of it, I mean, I like I like a lot of it. It's just that how it's shown is not, I don't think, necessarily giving it the best space possible in this section particular. However, I would say that as compared to, you know, like with the overview before, I feel like this does give a good broad section of your work. It does give me like an idea of, oh, the variety and the, you know, the possibility for you. Okay, let me just head into the comments. That one client comment was about the social project. Okay, and you sort of addressed that. Yeah, so I can head back to that if you'd like me to expand on it, but with the social section, I'll just go back there for a minute. I mean, if you're going to keep it in a project section, I guess, yeah, I think that if you're going to make a project section, they should all be same body of work, so that, because what you're basically saying to a client when they go into a project section is, this was one client and this is what I did for them. So I would definitely do that. Or I would break this out of your project section and put it and make it its own section, or integrate the work into other galleries, so that you're still showing the best work, but it's maybe in a different way. Like this could go into the portrait section, or, you know, or, and this, like, these are great shots, but, you know, they can live in another place as well. They don't necessarily need to be organized by project. Or if you really love what's going on in here, you can make this its own section and maybe build out upon it with other work that fits in this way. But I do feel like there's some work in here that doesn't necessarily need to be in here. But I do love this work, and I feel like this work should have a little more center stage as well. Okay, so where were we? We were in commercial. So yeah, so as I was saying, like separating this out, not a commercial section, having maybe a lifestyle section, maybe conceptual, or it really depends how you would pull it together. Like these are great and they work really well together. This could be in a lifestyle section. This could be in a lifestyle section. Like you've got some great business stuff, but pull it forward in a way that you know, elevates it. I wouldn't make a whole business section, but it could very easily fit into a lifestyle with some of the other, you know, lifestyle work, and then leading the viewer through that work so that images pop as you're going through, and they by the way, the images that they're surrounded around, and how you put the images together. I did want to look really quickly to show you how she has, if you click on the image and then you go to the next image and the next image, you know, that's it's great. I like to be able to view things this way as well. I'm not crazy about seeing the other images in the background. I personally like to see the white space in this way. For your work, I would say there's all different ways of showing it, but in your case, I would say I don't want to see the other images behind it, because I want to just live with that image and not feel distracted. I also, you know, there's the X, so you can go back to the grid, but having the toggle, as I've mentioned on other calls, be able to go to grid view and image view really easily and in a way that your clients the people who are looking at your website will understand is really important, which you do have that. I just prefer to just live with the image and not see what's behind it. Also feels a little bit too much to me when I look at a website and I'm looking at each image. It feels a little too basic. When I see this, it's like that kind of what's Lightbox, I think they call it. It's like a Lightbox gallery, and that just doesn't feel refined from my perspective. And also these might not be visible enough, the navigation. I mean, I know to go there, but as long as a client would be able to find where they navigate, how they get to the next images, that kind of thing. Okay, let me check in. I do agree with that about the commercial heading. I have struggled with that. It's all advertising for clients, just for different clients. Yeah, and I think, one of the things that I think a lot of photographers struggle with, and this is why I end up working with a lot of people, is because when, as a photographer, you're so attached to your work and you're so attached to the client and what you shot, for who you shot it. And if you can get out of that mindset, that will really help during the selection process, because you'll be able to see the work not attached to who you shot it for. You'll be able to see the work as just an image. And then when you're figuring out where it's going to go, it doesn't have the baggage of, oh, well, that was this kind of client, so it has to go in this section. You can get out of that mindset and more into, well, what feeling does this image evoke for me? And where does that most make sense in terms of, is it a lifestyle image? Even if the client was, or is this, this was maybe, so this was in that, was it? Yeah. So, who the end client is less relevant when you're putting your portfolio together, because whoever is going to be visiting your website that was not that client will not know the difference. And you kind of don't want them to. And that's another reason why I dissuade people from using projects, is because then you're putting something onto the image that it doesn't need to be there. You can create new stories, and you can create new ways of seeing and interpreting the images for people who are going to be seeing your work in the future. Whereas the projects define it and they limit it and they say, this is how I shot it. So this is how, I get the story part. It's showing how you would tell a story, but I also think that it really limits and packages things that you don't necessarily want to limit and package. Like, this image could be for so many different kinds of clients, right? But if I look at it in the project section, it's telling me who it was shot for. And so I'm looking at it through that lens, and I'm seeing it as, oh, well, that was shot for them. And people are so literal, right? So when you put it in another section and you see it next to other images, it tells a different story. Like, next to this tells me about how I could tell a beer story, and you didn't shoot them together. And this is, I think, a fitness shoot or something, but I don't know that necessarily. She could be dreaming about beer. And I kind of like that story. Like, when I'm putting work together, those are the things I'm going for the emotional part of it, and the side where it's like, okay, how do these images speak together? And, a client coming to visit your site, you want them to be able to experience it from their own angle and not have you put your own baggage on it from where it was actually derived. Hopefully that helps and makes sense. Sorry, I get really excited about this stuff. So, all right. Okay, we'll go, where were we here? Yes, so commercial section, I feel that now fashion, we go into fashion. I feel generally when I'm working with people and they shoot fashion or want to shoot fashion, just needed some water. I'd say, fashion is very, very specific. And usually if you're going to shoot fashion, I would suggest you just focus on fashion and not try to do, commercial work or, lifestyle work or anything else, because fashion is its own beast and you really need to want to do it because it's not a very lucrative industry in a lot of ways, and it's a tough industry. It's very competitive, all of that kind of thing. So when you want to do that, you need to go full on in that direction and let everything else go so that you are kind of standing out in that niche. However, in Lindsay's case, I do feel like her fashion work adds value to what she does as a whole. And also because I don't, because what I was saying, I don't know how to exactly describe this, but her fashion work has a commercial appeal to it, like an advertising appeal to it. And as somebody who wants to see what she could do, like I can look at this image and think how I could use it in a non necessarily fashion way, and there are certainly fashion clients, and if like it, but I think it appeals to more than just fashion clients, and that's why I think it works. I also think that it takes it basically is another way for people to come and see, oh wow, like these are really compelling images, these are really interesting, dynamic, cool images, and I want her to shoot for me. So it's not necessarily that I'm a fashion, going to be hiring her to do a fashion shoot, but if this is the work that resonates, then I'm going to be like, yeah, I want you to take, to be working on doing, the photography for me. So wedding throws me out though. Definitely. It doesn't fit. I feel like a lot of your fashion work is just really poppy and punchy and I'm blanking on words, like edgy, I guess. And this really takes me out. Anything wedding really takes me out unless it's like you do a lot of like, wedding fashion photography, and then you're going to kind of end up in that category. It just feels too pretty and light for a lot of the rest of your work in here. And whereas some of your other pretty, like in quote, work feels like this feels like it still has some interest to it, and it doesn't feel too kind of pretty. This one takes me out a little bit it feels a little too like Instagram world, partly because of the tones, and I think like it has like her outfit as well and everything about it, but also just the tones feel very like Instagram filter kind of look, whereas some of the other stuff, and maybe it could be in another section in your website, but it doesn't feel right in here. But I also, some of this stuff can, like this shot can have so many, it doesn't necessarily need to be fashion as well. This could exist in another way. I think there's a lot of, great work in here. Let me just see where. Yeah, no, I know. So Lindsay says, oh, that wasn't a wedding. It was for a wedding dress company, but I get it. And I agree. There are definitely, I know a lot of people are hired to do shoots for wedding dress companies, and that is commercial and everything like that. But again, it goes back to what I was saying. Just because somebody was a client in a commercial context, it doesn't mean that they end up on your website. And I think this is a good example of, yes, they were a commercial client. They hired you as a photographer. It was not an actual wedding. I do know that by looking at the image, but it doesn't feel in line with your brand. It doesn't feel in line with your aesthetic and the type of clients that, I would be wanting for you. This feels like something like, great, you got that job, but that's not really your ideal client. So let's not showcase it and draw attention to it. And it pulls me out of the experience of the rest of the work. So portraits. Yeah, I love the work in here as well. There's some of the work that I get down further. I saw something, I'll let you know in a second, but yeah, like great section. I definitely think that this all makes sense. Like this is the kind of thing where I was talking earlier about when you could make like a lifestyle section and a, more conceptual or whatever section. Like this could live in a lifestyle. This could live in lifestyle. This could live in lifestyle. And I sometimes sometimes portraits can live in either a lifestyle section. Like this could live in lifestyle. Yes, it could be a portrait. It could also be lifestyle. And when you're curating and deciding what galleries you're going to be creating, that's when you would decide, where does it most fit? Does this, even though it's a portrait, it could make sense in the portrait section. It could also make sense in the lifestyle section, and put it in both places, see how it feels and where it lives best. Because I feel like taking this out would really strengthen this section up. And this one, putting them in more of a lifestyle way will make the other images speak more to like an editorial portrait audience, which I think is more your goal. This too could be lifestyle. It doesn't feel like a portrait to me. And the reason it doesn't feel like a portrait, yes, I get it. He's there and looking to camera, but it feels more like a lifestyle ad. It doesn't feel editorial portrait. It doesn't feel any of that. It feels like this is more like, a client, a lifestyle advertising context. So I think that would really, like, you take that out and I think it'll make this whole section come to life a little bit more. Even though I think this section's great, but that's my take on it when I'm looking at it right now. Okay, so does that make sense? The other Instagramish one was the same shoot. Yeah, the same, like the wedding-ish shoot. Yeah, it has that feel to it as well. It's great. Like there's nothing wrong with it, and it's a beautiful shot. And I just, for me, it pulls me out when I'm looking at the rest of your work. It doesn't make sense in there for me. From what I'm seeing of your work as a photographer, I want to see it strong. And when I see something that pulls me out, it just doesn't fit to me. And I want to have, everything be really tight and strong. Okay, so here I am in the contact area. She's got a link to her email. Great, nice, big, front and center, easy to click on. Perfect. Phone number. Great. We want that. Address. As long as it's not your home address, then you're good. And then, you could make this a link if you want to link that out to your Instagram. But I assume that's because it's any social platform is what you would be using. Selected clients. This is great. Having these in a nice, clean way, easy to see on your page. I would say a little bio would be nice here. Doesn't need to be anything too crazy, but something I think that says, I am this kind of photographer in this city kind of thing. And I'm able to shoot in these places. Because you kind of, like I said, with the menu, with everything, you're really, really telling your clients, this is what I do. This is who I am. And I think it's just another opportunity. You can get more involved with your bio and tell, a story or do anything like that feels like it's you, that feels like it's telling them something about what they're going to be getting into if they work with you. Like, you know, you can give them a sense of that in your bio, but you also don't have to. And with a commercial bio, it is definitely more, you know, simple. Don't It's cut to the chase. Don't take people's time unless it's important, you know, important information or funny or something that's like, okay, how can I get this across in the most efficient way possible? So I do like this because it is efficient. It's easy and efficient and simple and gives me everything I need. But a little bio, I think, would be good. Okay, does that help? Do you have any other questions? Okay. Not my home address. Good. Okay. Oh man, someone write my bio. Hate writing bios. Yes, totally. I hear you. Mallory says, I'll write you a bio. Awesome. Okay. Lindsay says, haha, yes. Okay. Awesome. Well, great. I look forward to reading the bio, Mallory. Yeah, bios are tricky. It's hard to do. I would say that one of the things that I like to do with my clients when we're working on their bio is do a brainstorm session so that there is no kind of structure at first. It's just talking, and you could, as a photographer, you could record yourself just talking, and without too much, you know, thought put into, oh, is that like too much, or is that like that story is so done and everybody tells that story and this is, you know, who cares what everybody else does. When you're starting out with your bio, just, you know, throw it all up into one place, and then once you have it there, put it into note form. Look at it as that. Now, what comes out, what pops out, it might be little parts from different stories, or things that are relevant, and you won't know that until you start just throwing those ideas out and throwing those thoughts out, what's important to convey. However, you know, you might end up telling all these stories and just end up with like Lindsay Elliott is a fashion and commercial photographer, portrait fashion and commercial photographer based in Vancouver, Canada. She, you know, loves her cats, and I don't know, something like that. I know that you do love your cats, and I love your cats too. So I was actually gonna message you and ask you about your cats. I wouldn't overthink the bio. I would say the more you can kind of like, even with editing too, it's the same kind of thing. When you're selecting work, it's let go of your attachment to it, let go of your perception and what everybody else is doing and the whole industry and everything, and just look at it from a clean slate. Start from a clean slate and build on it slowly instead of trying to see it before it's happened. That's, you know, one of the things that's why it's so overwhelming to start an edit on your portfolio, is because you have all your work and there's just like, where do I start? How do I end up with what somebody else has, or with, I want to do that somebody else has. And I, you know, just look at the work, one image at a time, look at the work and say, that's a good image. It's not a good image. Or that's an image I want to shoot more of, you know, that kind of thing. And then the stories will build from there. And it's similar with your bio. Just start off one note at a time and build it from there. What is interesting, what is compelling, and don't try to be something that you're not. Don't try to be funny if you're not funny. Don't try to be quirky if you're not quirky. Just you know, really keep it simple and easy, you know. That's my tip. But it, you know, also keeping it true to you, true to who you are as a person and as a photographer, and trying to, you know, give them a little indication of who you are and what you're like to work with.